Introduction to the Interventions list in Meditech. This section will cover the use of the interventions list, which is your screens to document on as well as your to-do list. So from status board, we're going to work with Mr. EDIP Train today, and we're going to click over here on the right to interventions. What you will see when you get there is a long list of things to do for the patient. You'll notice once we got here at the top, it says page 1 of 2. So if you're looking for something, you may find it on the second page. The default when you first go into interventions is to bring up everything that's due currently or past due. And like mentioned in the status board, any date and time that is red means you're 1 minute past due. This patient doesn't get charted on every 4 hours like a patient would in real life, so you're going to see older dates and times due. When you're looking to find something specific, though, this interventions list is not in alphabetical order. It's in next scheduled order. But you can sort this list by any of the headers at the top. So if I'm looking for something, it's much easier to look in alphabetical order. So if I click on the word intervention, I can now change my view to alphabetical order to find something specific I'm looking for. The status you should see should only be active. Text order information. This allows the nurses to put in information somebody might need to know to care for the patient, or the physician to put in orders beyond whatever the stated order is. So for instance, this order to ambulate the patient has a comment bubble, and when you go to document it, or if you just want to know what it says, you can click on your little comment bubble, and it says on post-op day number 4, ambulate ×3. And then you just say okay, and you can move on with it. So how did I know this was a doctor's order? Well, that's the next column, the source column. And you'll notice it says OE for order entry, or doctor's orders. The one just above it says CP for care plan. So the ADL assessment comes out of the care plan. The other source you will see here is SC for standards of care. Standards of care are items that could be done on any patient, and so they're added initially, and then a lot of the rest of it comes from physician order or care plan. Occasionally you will see PS, which means patient standards, and this is something we've added by adding an intervention down here at the bottom. You would not do that as a student, and nurses don't do it that often. The next column is how often things are to be done. So you'll see PRNs when we do it this way mixed in with hourlies or BIDs, or if you scroll on down, we can see the every 4-hour type assessment. History will be the last time that any charting was done, and we'll look at that in a minute. What is the next scheduled time? If it's a PRN, obviously there won't be a time. If there's something you need to know about protocol related to one of these items, we look at intake and output assessment, and I click on that box with the little arrow in there. It will actually take me to the policy and procedure library. So you can actually get to the policy and procedure related to that. So that's another shortcut. Associated data gives you other key information you might need, and when you click on that, you can actually see a quick look at the INO without going to where that is stored. I close out of that. So those are some links that are available through the interventions listing. When you get to your intervention, your screen will default to whatever is due next. For most of the time, that's what you want. For today, let's go ahead and put the screen in alphabetical order so we can find things more easily. So any of the headers of these columns that are yellow are interactive, meaning you can click on them and sort by that information. So let's sort by intervention by clicking on the word intervention, and you now have it in alphabetical order. We've talked about some of the other items in terms of columns and what they mean. and you could see more realistically what histories would look like rather than something like 55 days. We have 44 minutes for the pediatric admission database. We're going to go through some of those screens in a little while, but I wanted to point out just sort of the basics of how you go ahead and you document. If we're going to document an INO, you would highlight INO assessment. You could either double click or you could click document down here at the bottom. It will bring up the current time. You should be documenting for the time you did it. So if you need to change the time, say we did this at 10:15, could do that. You could say OK, and now you have your intake side and output side. Again, this is called a go-to list, meaning you have two choices to chart from. So when you want to come back and chart to the other choice, you would use the go-to button on the screen. So let's click on the intake side and notice that this is still a spreadsheet, but it's essentially two columns. Wherever you see square boxes, you can choose more than one item. For instance, I could say, well, I'm charting on those two things, or maybe I'm just charting oral. Whenever you see a rectangular box, you either have free text, so in this case, I could type in, or you have an actual number pad, which we'll see when we get to vital signs. Then where you see two circles, those you have to choose one or the other. If I choose no, I can't also choose yes. Or I can leave it blank. In this case, it doesn't apply to our patient. But let's say our patient ate 50% of his tray. I can put in the 50 by typing or by using the keypad here. Hit enter or hit OK. And then let's say that formula patient is taking is 2% milk. Remember, he's 2 years old. And then down here under intake totals, I could say he took 120. Again, here you can just use the keypad as well and say OK. That will then go over to your INO sheet. So there's a cumulative intake. If I needed to assess a tube or how well they tolerated it, it's there. Any interventions I did are here. I notified the bedside nurse. I held the feeding, whatever. Now we want to get back to that list to do the patient's output. So we're going to use the go-to button because that was called a go-to list. And now we're going to click on output. He's voiding normal for age, which in this case, because he's where he could be potty trained or not, I'm going to say diaper. How much urine the baby actually voided or micturated, 250 mLs. It was yellow. You'll notice I only get to choose one of those. I don't need a urinary catheter, a urostomy. Baby didn't have a stool this time, but if he had, I would just put in the number of stools and describe them. It's very rare we weigh a stool. Say Phil had one emesis, and it was 10 mLs. And we don't use this because we could actually measure it. And it was formula or food because he drank that milk and coughed. There's your gastric tube. There's your output drains if you need them, CSF, etc. We finished with this. We're going to go back to our go-to list. You'll notice both of them are now purple, and this means they haven't been saved. So you could actually go in and add if you needed to. We could also save from here, but I want to take you back. When you don't have this save button, you would use the done button. So let's use the done button. Because you are a student, you would put your password in, and then you would need a cosign by your instructor or a nurse, and then that would allow this to be saved.